Hey, how's it going?
What's going on, man?
Hey, Ryan, it's good to connect, man. I think we haven't done this podcast in a couple weeks, I guess. I don't know the exact timeline.
Yeah, it feels like a few weeks, but excited to be back recording. I'm sure we have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we're going to get back to it. A couple people have DM'd me and emailed me like, when's the next podcast coming? It's coming. I miss doing it. I wish we could, and we are going to get back to like a weekly cadence.
Yeah.
It might take us 1 or 2 weeks to get to that weekly cadence, but we're going to batch a bunch of interviews coming up soon. So the podcast is not going anywhere. I want to keep doing this for a very long time. The challenge is Ryan and I both run marketing agencies, which is like, and they're somewhat, new, less than 2 years old. So there's a lot of work to be done. Things get canceled sometimes.
Yeah, there's always something to do. It's good busy, but no, this is fun. And honestly, like it's always nice to catch up. I feel like whenever we record something like this, I learn a ton that I can then go apply to partners we're working with. And it's cool just to meet folks too that are listening. So yeah, I'm very excited to continue doing this.
Yeah, me too. And I'm looking forward to more interviews too. I want to talk to people who are kind of less well known. Like I want to bring on the top founder CEOs in media or in newsletters. We're going to get to those too, but also people who like, maybe they're a deliverability expert. That's someone who I want to have on the podcast. Maybe they know a specific tactical thing that we can, get insight on. So we're going to do more of that too. I also want to bring on someone who's like a head of partnerships or head of sales at a newsletter first media company like a Morning Brew or a 1440, kind of walk through their sales process and how that works. I think that'll be cool. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree to both. I mean, deliverability, I think, is something that everyone's thinking really deeply about all the time because it's like the foundation of whether or not an email-centric business is successful. And then sales is another question that I feel like we both get a lot, like how somebody should get started. Yeah, I think just more like ops people too. And when I say ops, I just mean like we've obviously spoken to some really cool founders and CEOs that are, obviously a little bit involved with every part of the business, but it'd be cool to bring some people on that are maybe more hands-on and in the weeds with it kind of executing on a day-to-day basis as well.
Yeah,
but yeah,
there's a lot to do. I'll put out a poster or a tweet about like who should we have on, and if any listeners have suggestions, let us know, or you can shoot us an email too. But that'll be fun. Anything new in your world, Ryan? Anything else going on?
Staying busy. No, like I said, it's all good busy. We're just we're learning a lot every day about what makes not just like a high engagement newsletter, but a newsletter that converts folks into leads or into purchasers. That's been like the main focus for us lately. But yeah, there's always something to do, as you said. What about yourself?
Yeah, things are going great. We're growing really quickly and adding a lot of clients, and of course adding team members to train and work with those clients. And so both that takes time, and we've probably been a little bit understaffed for the past really 6 weeks. So hiring a lot of folks. And if you're someone listening who wants to like apply, you can find my Twitter or LinkedIn and reach out to me there. You can see like a pin post to apply for one of the jobs there. We've probably found some of the best people through this podcast, through Twitter, LinkedIn, my accounts there, my newsletter. That's been a powerful thing about building an audience. Not a lot of people talk about it, is you can just find people. And like the alternative process is so bad. I don't know how many job postings you've done to like LinkedIn jobs and Indeed or whatever, but man, that is a rough process. You're getting like hundreds of applicants that you have to pay for. Most are unqualified. Then you have to qualify and interview those people. It's really a mess.
Yeah, I've only hired through Twitter, which is kind of a funny thing to think about. But we've put like, if I put out a tweet, and engagement hack for anybody listening too, those are always my most engaged tweets, is when I say like, hey, we're looking for writers. And we always get tons of qualified people just sending stuff over. So yeah, like Twitter or just like cold email is like pretty much only how we've hired folks that we work with, or
just cold emailing people who you think are a good fit. Like
both. So yeah, and this also speaks to just an added benefit of newsletters for anybody who's listening that's just wants to get started with writing a newsletter, and they're like, oh, well, maybe I won't have that big of an audience or anything like a newsletter also just serves as like a great portfolio for writers. So if you're just publishing regularly and it's good quality content, because that's like how we scope writers that we work with too, is we'll just like, we're both obviously pretty plugged into to the newsletter world. And so when I see something that has really good content and maybe not like a lot of immediate momentum, like, you know, they're growing at like a normal organic pace, I would just say, hey, like, would you like to get paid to write for us as well? And then for some of our partners, and a lot of times folks are interested in that. So, and then also vice versa, like folks reaching out to us via cold email.
Yeah, we've actually had a number of people at my company who they're newsletter founders and they just want to learn growth, or they have some growth experience, but maybe not a ton as the average person that works with us is from like a marketing agency or something. And we've had one guy, Fernando, who runs this newsletter called Espresso Macho, which is like a Spanish language newsletter about tech. He worked with us for a long time. Eventually his newsletter kept growing and growing, and he basically went full-time with that and is no longer with us, but that worked out really well. And so we're doing a couple more of those too.
That's awesome. Yeah. I'm curious, like, this is something that there are folks that we work with that are either writers or copywriters of ours that have been really interested in growth. Like, something that I've told people that are interested in like the growth marketing side is that so much of it now is just copywriting. Like, and I mean, you're obviously so involved in the operations at for some pretty large newsletters just in terms of acquisition. Like, would you say that's accurate? Like, copywriting and developing creative is now kind of the key skill to be successful on the growth side?
Yeah, it's definitely the foundation. And the funny thing is, like, it hasn't really changed. Copywriting has always been the foundation. Mm-hmm. Media buying used to be a little bit more complicated 5 years ago, 10 years ago. To put together a landing page, you had to maybe know some HTML. And so, like, those things have only gotten easier. Like, the tech side has only gotten easier. So that leaves actually the soft skills or the art side of it. Although the art is informed by data. So not to say, like, copywriting is just an art. Basically, and one thing about copywriting I found is, like, I never am just like coming up with ideas without some type of data. So we're always looking at like what ad worked in the past, what ad is working for another advertiser, and then getting data on that ad, not just like seeing a random ad in our feed. Like, how do we have data on if this ad is actually working or not? Have they been running this ad for multiple months? Does it have thousands of engagements? And then, like, that's our inspiration point. It's not just like random things. And so it really is everything. You have to be able to make that, though, into something that looks presentable, whether that's an image or a video, motion graphic, TikTok style video. You have to be able to do that too. So that's an added little bit of design complexity, but it's not too hard to do if you're willing to just like learn how to use Canva, learn how to use CapCut or Capwing, or work with like an actor on Fiverr. It's not hard to do. And really, I see a lot of the design problems are just like comes down to like laziness. Like, not really, it's not people lacking design skill. It's just they're lacking attention to detail and the time to put into work to actually make it look really good, which is a constant frustration of mine. Because you don't have to be a designer to make a good looking ad. It doesn't have to be amazing.
CapCut is so easy. Like, it blows my mind. I mean, what a great product. And it makes everything so easy. I mean, like, even like if you're just like somebody who's wanting to make shorts and just grow an audience that way, it doesn't have to be ads. But if you're just making shorts, I mean, like, it's never been easier to just like auto subtitle a video, throw some music on it, even like remove the background from yourself and put yourself like, in front of a screen or like an effective green screen or something like that. Like, it's wild. It just makes it so easy.
It's so easier than it used to be. And also, like, if you're intimidated by that, you can learn how to use it in like 30 minutes, and then you can edit a 30-second video in like 10 to 15 minutes, many times less. And that's all you need. And if the video is good, if the copy in that video is good, it's going to crush it.
Yeah.
And so I don't see how more people are not better at this. You know what I mean? It's like, we've been doing it for a long time, but it's not super complicated. And it's frustrating because we'll have people come into our company who are like super experienced at agencies, brands, etc. And like the creative they're producing is just like awful, and it takes them way too long. And then I'll go in and I'll make like 15 ads in 45 minutes that are way better, unfortunately, for better or for worse. And it's like the way marketing is done at a lot of companies is really backwards.
100%. Especially the bigger the company, most of the time, I feel like, yeah.
That's why it's tough to find marketers, right?
You need people that are scrappy is like what, like, I feel, especially in marketing, because it's so testing and like it's so experimental based. It's so I'm looking for the word here, but it's so based on experimentation, where you need your speed of iteration is kind of everything, and also your willingness to just dive in and try some. Like, it's funny you mentioned the UGC. Like, this is pretty wild, but so traditionally for UGC, you have to go through like something like Fiverr or Upwork and like book folks. And the speed to iteration, relatively slow as it is with influencer marketing or anything that requires another person recording themselves and, hashing through a script and all that stuff. Something that I came across recently that's pretty wild is there's AI UGC now, where you
I'm
literally
glad you brought this up.
script.
I've been using this.
Yeah, I was messing around with it too. And it is so the one that I messed around with, it's called Arcads. I don't know if you're using
that's the one that we
one.
use. Yeah, and I've used another one called Creatify, which is okay, but I like Arcads the best so far. That's the one that we pay for.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I mean, you give it a script, you choose an actor and one of like 20 AI actors. Some of them look better than others, I will say. And then you can even go as far as to like choose the voice that these people have. And it takes about, you give it the script, it takes about 5 minutes. And then you have an AI actor who, if you look very closely, it's a little uncanny valley, but it looks good enough to anybody who's just like watching the ad and not like thinking to look for it being AI. And then you can take that and in CapCut or something, throw subtitles on, put it in front of like a screen, and it looks just like any UGC ad. And the time to iteration, instead of being 4 days of back and forth with somebody on Fiverr or Upwork, is now literally like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It's wild.
Yeah, I think we've probably moved about half of our video ads to that in the past 2 or 3 months. And I still want to use actors because one thing they haven't got right is like the voice speed, like the words that are coming out in the mouth don't match. So you have to kind of be tricky with your video editing. You have to like put some B-roll and put them in the corner and make them small, or put B-roll so you're not seeing their mouth. So it almost requires a little bit more video editing than an actor because you have to kind of hide that. But still great. And it's also a way to like test 5 different videos, for example, and then you take the top 2 and then you go to a creator or an actor and you get them to do those. And that might be our process, going forward, is doing that type of thing, and it saves you a lot of money.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. You're right though, because when you are paying attention, the mouth can match at an okay, but like sometimes the gestures, because they really try and like make the actors like gesture and stuff. Yeah, it's like they'll just say, and it's just a little uncanny. Like they're like pointing at the wrong time, or like, and you're like, it doesn't seem entirely right. But to your point, if you're using something like CapCut and you just green screen them out and put them in front of like a screen that kind of, and subtitles to at least distract some of the attention away from the AI-ness of it, it's super useful. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and you don't really want people looking at the actor anyways, because if you don't have any B-roll or any green screen or whatever for a 30-second video, people are not going to watch that full thing. You got to have like every 5 seconds there needs to be something new on screen. So, and you're trying to show off the product visually anyways. It's hard to do with a newsletter, but it's doable.
Yeah,
so that's cool.
Scrolling.
Yeah, I'm glad we covered that. Any other cool creative stuff that you've seen recently?
I saw one shared on Twitter that we messed around with a little bit, and it actually had some pretty good performance. Where it was, I mean, really like it's nothing that we haven't covered, in that it's like copy is king, and that having the copy front and center in creative ways will generally perform better than variants that don't feature the copy in front. I don't know if that's been a general takeaway of yours, but something that I've seen people do is like literally print out or write down like the copy, like the copy of the ad, and having like an AI voiceover reading the copy, and then even going as far as like having a video of this printed out copy and pointing to each word as it's said, like with like a pen or something like that.
I've seen that, and that's worked well for us. That is one that if it gets picked up a lot, people are going to see it and they're like, oh, this is an ad, and they'll skip it.
Yeah.
So that's
exactly.
like a limited time ad format, kind of like iPhone notes. Like, yeah, we still use those. They still work. Those worked really well about 2 years ago. And then every company, every newsletter has done them. Pretty much anybody who has ever run an ad has made some type of iPhone note ad at this point. And it's still worth testing, but like, it's not the same as it used to be. We do a lot of like what I call like interface hacking. So it's like an ad that looks like something else. That could be, so iPhone note is an example of that. Another example would be a tweet screenshot, whether that's a real tweet or something that you just write out in Canva or something. Could be something that looks like an email, something that looks like a Reddit post, a Quora post, a Google search result, a Slack message, like the list goes on. anytime you can do
ChatGPT.
that UI hacking, that works really well. If the copy has to be good, of course, all of it comes down to that, but that helps.
Yeah, we messed around with a ChatGPT variant one time. It didn't perform very well, but it might just not have been. It might have just been the copy. But but at the very end, just so that we at the end of like ChatGPT's output, where we just said like, and you definitely didn't tell us to say this for an ad or anything like that. So kind of like a wink at the camera, but also maybe to kind of like cover our ass a little bit too and be like, this isn't like OpenAI's recommendation or anything.
I like having like a wink in there if you can. I'll tell you about a project we're doing, something like that for later. I can't cover it here. That's cool, man. There's a lot to cover. There's also a guy named Alex Cooper, who I really like, who shares a lot of these ad creative insights on Twitter, and he runs a creative agency. So shout out to him. You should give him a follow. Have you seen him, Ryan?
I haven't. I'm going to follow him right now.
Yeah, he and this guy named Ollie, he used to work for me. Now run a basically agency that only does ad creative, and they've grown very quickly. And
Nice.
They do a really good job, and they know their stuff. Let's see here. Let's get into the topics. I think I've got a couple of things we can talk about today. The elusive negative CAC that we've been meaning to talk about for like 3 episodes. Do you have any things on your docket? I got 2 things.
I have an approach to creating content that we've been kind of messing around with lately, but yeah, we can maybe get into that after we go through the. I know.
Yeah,
I feel like we should prioritize negative CAC. Yeah.
And then I have one more thing we can maybe get into, but we really won't have time for that. Negative CAC is one that's really interesting. I'm going to do my best to explain it. This is a concept, and I've brought in a couple examples, but there's a lot to cover. So first of all, and I'm also kind of riffing here, so I'm doing my best. Let's see. Negative CAC is basically building a media company or a media product profitably, using that to build an audience and then selling that audience something else. So the most common examples are someone builds a media company, whether that's newsletter, blog, YouTube video, etc. They monetize through advertising, through sponsorships. They build a profitable business. And then maybe after that, they start a software company, or they start an e-commerce business where they're selling a physical product. And they sell that product or software to their audience, and they're able to acquire customers at a negative customer acquisition cost because they were paid to build that audience through their sponsorship or advertising business. So that is what negative CAC is at the most basic level. Any questions on that or clarifications?
Yeah, so it's, and generally, is it media companies that you see kind of like, I mean,
generally,
I guess
media companies, yeah, that's kind of who those types of businesses have coined this term negative CAC. I don't know who quite came up with it, but there are some other examples I can talk about that are not quite media, but they're similar to media.
Nice. Yeah, let's get into it.
But I think the key thing is like you have to build an audience profitably so you can sell that audience something else. And ideally, the thing that you're selling that audience is something better than advertising, right? So like building a SaaS business, many people say SaaS is one of the greatest business models because you have recurring revenue, you have low churn, and you have very high multiples if you get acquired or if you raise money for that SaaS business, right? So we're not talking about like building a media company and then having another advertising product and selling that to your audience. Like that's not quite the same thing as negative CAC. But anyways, let's get into examples because that's really the best way to describe this. The first one I have is a company called Freight Waves, which is kind of now called Firecrown Media. Have you ever heard of him? This is founded by a guy named Craig Fuller.
I have heard of. I follow Craig on Twitter, and I've definitely explored Freight Waves a bit.
Yeah, so Craig Fuller was on the MFM podcast recently, and he kind of got into this a little bit. But basically, he started a media company called Freight Waves. It is, I would call it like a B2B media company that covers freight. And so freight is, I'm bad at describing this, but it's like supply chain logistics, trucking, maybe even aviation if you're like carrying freight. And what's going on in the industry. So it's like classic B2B media publication. They have a blog, they have multiple newsletters, that's really it. Honestly, that's like the main parts of their media. They don't have a massive audience. They have about 1.5 or 1.3 million website visitors per month, which is actually a lot for a B2B niche like this. But logistics and freight is like $1 trillion industry. It's a very big industry. That might be an exaggeration. Anyways, to break down what has happened. So basically, they built this media company. I don't know if it was profitably the whole way, but it is now. And then they started what we might call like a SaaS or a data subscription called Sonar. And that SaaS business, Sonar, is forecasted to be a $30 million software business. And Firecrown Media, which includes FreightWaves and a couple other media publications, is predicted to be a $50 million media business. And those numbers are from Craig. I think that's what he said on the My First Million podcast. It's growing quickly. So they had less than $3 million in revenue in 2021, and they're on their way to do a revenue run rate of $50 million per year and $8 million in profit in 2024. And that's Firecrown, the media business. That's not Sonar. That's just the media business. And I think
And the media
business, yeah, B2B media.
Sorry.
So they have one about boating. They have one they have Flying Magazine. And there's maybe, I don't know all the publications, but there's maybe 4 or 5 different publications in their media business portfolio called Firecrown.
Wow. And they monetize through advertising or through sponsorship that the media company does?
Yeah, they do. So they have sponsorships. They also have some magazines. So they have sponsorships in the magazines. They have ads on the website, ads in the newsletter. I'm sure they do some lead generation stuff, some webinars, white papers, stuff like that. That's common in B2B. So all the different types of advertising products that you would have in a B2B media company.
Did he share how they grew? Like I guess on I haven't listened to the episode, but
they didn't get into a lot of the tactics around that. I mean, it's been around since 2017.
Okay.
They rank for a lot of SEO keywords. They've kind of built up a reputation as like, if you want information about freight, like you go to FreightWaves. Like it's really the number one or the number 2 player. They have a lot of full-time acclaimed journalists that are experts in that area. So didn't get a lot of the tactical stuff there, but that's a couple of things that I remember. I didn't get the revenue for Sonar, other than Sonar is forecasted to be a $30 million software business. I don't know if that's revenue or valuation. I couldn't find that. So it's a cool example of like someone building a media business and then starting a software business. And actually now Sonar has spun off from Firecrown. So they're separate businesses. The media business is separate than the software. And that is because they're valued completely differently. And it just made sense to make them separate so that they could set up Sonar for an acquisition.
Very cool. Yeah, that's a really cool story. And I feel like it definitely fits within the broader trend that we've been talking about for a while, and that I know a lot of experienced operators have been talking about, of kind of niche B2B media being the play if you're looking if you're looking to build a really valuable business. So that's very interesting.
And then B2B software off of that. I mean, this is hard to do though. So keep in mind, FreightWaves, which includes Sonar, has raised $92.4 million in funding since 2017. So they raised a lot of money. And I think it's a great example. I don't think it's the best example that I have on this list. I have about 26 more examples that I want to cover. Just
perfect.
It's more like
let's get into it.
I have like 4 or 5 more that are actually really good. So I think Craig's doing a great job. Love what he's doing. The only little caveat there is they raised a lot of money. So I don't think it was profitable all the way through. What do you think is the best example that I've found of a company that's used negative CAC to build the biggest business and have the biggest outcome as far as revenue and acquisition?
So negative CAC doesn't have to, I mean, or the product doesn't have to be, in the definition of this, it doesn't have to be software. It just can be products. It can be.
Yeah, it could be physical product. Could be software. So I would think
maybe Kevin Espiritu. Do you know that guy? He has the plant.
I want to cover him. I'll get to that because he's on my list. He's up there for sure, but he hasn't had the biggest outcome. He just recently raised funding. So they're still kind of in the beginning of their negative CAC journey.
Yeah.
Actually, the biggest outcome example that I could find was Russell Brunson in ClickFunnels, which a lot of people wouldn't expect to even fit in this category because they don't have a traditional media company. They sell information products. They sell courses, memberships, digital products, stuff like that. But I'm going to put it in the negative CAC category because they're selling essentially media to fund and grow a software business, which is ClickFunnels. Let me walk you through the numbers here. So I couldn't get a clear start date in ClickFunnels. Somewhere between 2014 and 2016, ClickFunnels hit $265 million in revenue, which I'm assuming is ARR, and 150,000 customers in 2023. So they're likely around the same size or maybe slightly bigger now. It's really hard to find data about this because Russell didn't raise any money for ClickFunnels. And that's why this is probably the most impressive out of all of these, because raised zero money and had the biggest financial outcome out of all the examples that I have found. So Forbes says ClickFunnels is a $360 million SaaS business, and it was entirely self-funded. Laka which is a website that has a ton of data on SaaS companies. He said ClickFunnels had 160 million in ARR, and he said $5 billion exit in 2023 question mark. So again, I spent a lot of time Googling this, but I couldn't find like clear data on, and it was acquired, by the way. It was acquired in 2023. Like, we know that, but we don't know for how much. So let's just say they had annual recurring revenue of between 150 million and 265 million. I mean, I don't know what the multiples will be, but like very good for a SaaS company, right? So they might have had $1 billion exit, and entirely self-funded through selling courses, information products. So like, have you seen a lot of Russell's stuff out there in one of his books?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, being in marketing and having used ClickFunnels, the product. And I remember when I first got onto like the ClickFunnels website, I was like kind of taken aback at just how much like media there was everywhere, and like the videos and the upsells and all that stuff. And it was all featuring Russell too. So, but that's, yeah, I mean, mind-blowing scale of business to be entirely bootstrapped like that.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't really think much of that business, but it's way bigger than I think a lot of people expect. And the cool thing is like, so basically Russell, he just created all these educational products about how to use funnels to grow your business. And he covered like every type of business. People are selling info, people are doing nonprofits, e-commerce, etc. And so every single educational product he created, whether that's a course, a book, a challenge, newsletter, podcast, etc., all of it basically taught the same types of things. But the kicker was, it was like, to do those things, you need to use ClickFunnels, or you should use ClickFunnels because that's the best software option to do it. And it really was for a long time in many cases. And so there wasn't even a lot of like hard pitching of like, sign up for ClickFunnels here. If you bought a book, for example, but like to do the things he's talking about in the book, like you had to use ClickFunnels because that was the only product that was available. So I thought that was really cool. It's like kind of different than what you would expect. Like, info products have created the biggest negative CAC outcome, not necessarily media products so far.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great example. And yeah, I didn't see that one coming, but I love that you brought that one up. So we've got 23 more examples to go.
Yeah, I'll run through these quickly. So Blockworks, this is a newer company, a media company for crypto. I'm sure you're familiar with them. So they raised $12 million at a $135 million valuation, and they're using that money to accelerate their research and data analytics product called Blockworks Research, which is kind of like a SaaS product or a data subscription. And they sell that to institutional investors, family offices, things like that. And so Blockworks have a media company, they have a blog, newsletter, they do events. They did $20 million in revenue, actually over $20 million in revenue in 2022. And so they have that traditional media business that's profitable, and they raised money to build this SaaS product, Blockworks Research, that they believe can get them a higher valuation later on and a bigger exit. So kind of an example that's still in progress because they just raised this money last year, but one that's doing well. Two more real quick. Doug DeMuro, Cars and Bids. So he built this YouTube channel, and he got a $37 million investment from the Churning Group to grow his car auction website called Cars and Bids. I don't know the revenue numbers for this, but I'm assuming it's in the 8 figures. And a big part of that $37 million investment was him taking money off the table. I think he took 8 figures off the table for himself, and the rest went into the business for growth. Kevin Espiritu, Epic Garden, he also raised from the Churning Group. He raised $17.5 million. And what they said in this Axios article was he's going to use that investment to grow the e-commerce operation. It also mentioned operations and content teams, but I think most of that money is going into e-commerce because that's really their play with Epic Gardening. It's like classic content to commerce. So they have the blog, YouTube channel, TikTok, etc. And then they're selling physical products to gardeners. They're selling like buckets and bales and whatever gardeners use, right? And so they've also bought physical product companies and grown through acquisitions too.
Yeah, that's the one that I've seen just on Twitter and on YouTube and out in the wild a lot, and it's been really cool to see. Another one that I just saw, have you ever heard of Ethan Chablowski? Do you know this guy?
Not really.
So he's built a YouTube channel all about kind of high protein, healthy recipes. And then very recently, I think in the last few months, he launched a website that's, I mean, it's from my understanding, kind of almost like an AI powered like recipe book, and I might totally be butchering the concept of it. But I just thought it was interesting because it's just another example of somebody with a media platform who's grown that media platform over time and very organically as well, starting to build kind of like a software, tech component to their business.
There's really so many examples. I have like 5 here that I think are pretty interesting, but there's literally dozens. And a lot of these are kind of like under the radar. You wouldn't really think about them in this category, but it's more common than a lot of people realize. And so a funny one I was thinking was like Liver King could actually be a good example of this. I don't have him in here, but if we wanted to cover him and do a deep dive on the Liver King, I think we could dive into his supplement business and like how he's growing his media empire. That might be fun.
Yes. The all natural Liver King.
Okay. Another one that's really big is the Motley Fool. So you're familiar with them, right?
Yeah.
So the Motley Fool has built a $100 million newsletter information product and advertising business. So massive media empire, but they've used that audience that they've built, and they have one of the biggest audiences in finance. They've used that audience to build a couple other businesses. So there's really 3 main ones that I want to cover. They have a business called Motley Fool Asset Management, and this is their ETF business. So Motley Fool has ETFs that you can go to your brokerage and invest in them. They have actively managed funds, and they have passively managed funds that are probably more like a Vanguard fund. And the way they make money through this asset management business, these ETFs, is they take a fee, the expense ratio, right? So their expense ratios for the active funds are 0.85%. So imagine you invested into one of their active funds, you invested 100K over 10 years, they would take just over $8,000 in fees from your investment, assuming that investment didn't grow at all, which it should grow in theory, right? And the passive funds have a 0.5% expense ratio. So if you invested 100K over 10 years, a little under $5,000 in fees if it doesn't grow at all. So a really good business model. You take people's money, you invest it into publicly traded companies through an ETF that's probably mostly automated, and you take a 0.5% of their money every single year.
Interesting. I didn't know that they were actively managing people's money. That is very interesting.
Yeah, and they have another business where they do even more of that. So the next one is their Motley Fool Wealth Management service. So they do active stock picking and professional portfolio management for high net worth people. So you need a minimum of $300,000 to invest with them, which isn't a huge minimum for something like this. And they also work with portfolios that are way bigger than that, of course. And the way they make money is also through a management fee. So they take 0.95% of your money every year. We'll just say 1%. And that is their fee for actively managing your portfolio, picking stocks for you, advising you on your wealth, etc. There's a lot of wealth management businesses in the world, a lot of ETF businesses too. But I thought it was interesting the Motley Fool shows this because they have a very successful media and education business, and they used that audience to build this too, which I thought was a really good example of negative CAC, and also an example of someone who's picking a really good business model, right? Funds, basically, where you take a percentage of people's money, and also you might get some carry on the upside, are often talked about as one of the best business models that exist. I think people talk about SaaS and they talk about funds in those same types of categories. I don't know if there's another type of business model people think of, but that's up there. And then the final one they have is a venture fund. So they have a traditional VC fund, and they have $250 million of assets under management, and they take a 2% fee and 20% carry. So they're doing about $5 million in annual management fees for the VC fund.
That's so interesting. And like, I wasn't aware that they were in this kind of business, but it does seem like a natural evolution, especially having positioned themselves as, experts when it comes to stock picking and investing advice. If you've established yourself that way and you have folks in your audience that, are willing to invest with you at that point, and you're able to do that responsibly, then it makes sense as a natural evolution.
Yeah, and they're covering every angle, right? So like what they do with the newsletters is self-directed investing. Like if you want to pick stocks yourself, read our research and get our advice on what we recommend you pick and you do it yourself. Or if you want us to do it for you, we have the wealth management. Or if you want to invest in an ETF, we have ETFs for you. Or if you want to get into the venture capital assets class, you can invest in our VC fund if you're an accredited investor, probably. Or if you have the minimum funds for that. So like they have basically this value ladder that they've built where they can work with any type of investor that that are possibly out there.
Yeah, and just as like a quick, I guess, like aside for folks listening, like building a SaaS or building like a software product to offer your audience, I mean, that may sound like a high bar, but a way that you could think about potentially approaching this is like, what is like a micro SaaS that you could build to solve a single problem for your readers, for your ICP, for your audience? Because in some ways, like the bar has never been lower for creating something like that. Like you have no code tools like Bubble, and you could even just like hire somebody on Fiverr to build a little Bubble tool for you. You know, you could really think of it as a problem at a time. Like what is a singular problem that we could solve for folks in our audience, and what is a micro SaaS that we could build to solve that problem?
Like one feature.
Yeah, one feature, exactly. And using that as an MVP, and if it's successful and feedback is good and you're starting to get some momentum, then you can start to build on top of that.
So the cool thing about AI is I think it gives an advantage and it gives leverage to everyone, but especially media companies or creators who have an audience. And a lot of people have been talking about how media is a shitty business model, which in many cases it is, especially the advertising side of it. I think info products are actually a great business model, but not a lot of people actually can do that well or know how to do it well, I should say. But because AI has made it easier to build software products, if you have an audience, that could give you a huge advantage, right? I've talked to, and I've seen a lot of founders who are like 50% of our code base for our SaaS product is generated by AI. So in theory, and I think this is true, it's becoming faster and cheaper to build software products. So that gives an advantage to people who have the audience to sell them to, where they can use negative CAC, right? Okay, 2 more examples, and then we'll wrap this one up. So MeatEater, this is another company that raised money from the Churning Group. They raised $50 million from the Churning Group and Next Frontier Capital. They have the big media business. They have a Netflix show. They have a website. I think they have a newsletter, YouTube channel. They have a lot of different media properties. They do advertising, stuff like that. But the way they are making most of the revenue, I believe, is through commerce. So they have a ton of different physical products, and they've acquired a ton of different physical product companies in the outdoor camping, hunting space. And so they've really grown a lot through acquisitions. I think they've acquired 4 different physical gear brands, and then they sell those products to their audience that they've built up. And so another just kind of similar to, I mean, basically the Churning Group is doing the same playbook.
I was going to say, yeah. It sounds like our takeaway here is raise money from the Churning Group.
I think so. But I mean, I think a lot of the stuff actually can be done without raising money because we're talking about negative CAC here, right? So I think there's some other great examples. Another one that didn't raise money is Alex and Layla Hermosi. This is kind of one that's a little bit out of the box, right? They're not really selling anyone anything, but they do have basically a private equity firm. So they built up this massive audience on social, 10 million plus followers, right? Probably more across the two of them. Acquisition.com acquires small businesses. I think they usually start at $3 million in revenues, their sweet spot, maybe like 3 to 10 million. Founder-led businesses, a lot of people have info products, services, things like that. And because they've built up this kind of cult following, from what I've heard, they're able to acquire these businesses at a very low multiple and with a very small amount of cash. And they'll take a 20 to 50% stake in that business. And then their offer is, we're going to help you grow your business. We're going to help you like triple your business in a couple of years. And it's worth it to give up 40% of your business to us because we're going to triple it, right? Even though we don't give you much capital. I've heard these deals that they're giving to companies are like pretty rough for the companies, but if they actually grow and it works out, maybe it will turn out okay. Have you heard anything about their process?
Only what I've read in books like, $100 million leads and $100 million offers. I haven't really followed I haven't really read up too much on like the journey and the process, but
it's not really much out there unless you've talked to somebody who's gone through this process. And I haven't talked to a lot of people. So it's an interesting thing because it's like, instead of building their own products, they're just taking equity cheaply from someone else and using their products. The thing I don't love about what they do is like, they never promote their portfolio companies. They never talk about them. They never share them. And so I'm like, you have this massive audience, but you don't talk about any of the companies that you own. That's a little bit confusing to me. And Alex says it's because, and this is what I've heard from one of his videos, it's like, if one of those companies does something bad, that would hurt his reputation. But I'm like,
that's
come on,
weird.
Yeah, it's like you shouldn't.
It's kind of a cop out.
Yeah, it's kind of a cop out. You're vetting these people anyways, so like they shouldn't be doing that. And I feel like if I'm giving you 40% of my business for almost nothing, I should be able to get like some promotion out of it, especially if my business is relevant to your audience, right? But so it's interesting. They're doing very well. Let's see. The next one I have here is Cody Sanchez, which is she's kind of done some similar but very different things. So like the cool thing about Cody is she started in 2020. So this is like very recent. She's growing super quickly. Over 5 million social media followers, approximately over 700,000 newsletter subscribers. She has a membership and course business that does over $10 million in annual recurring revenue. But there's more. So she has Contrarian Thinking Capital. That is a VC fund. Hasn't raised as much money as some of the other examples, but I think she started out, I couldn't find the numbers exactly because they're not publicly available, but she started out by raising 5 million. And I'm sure she's raised much more than that at this point. This was a couple of years ago. And then she has this holding company called Main Street Holding Company. I couldn't find the assets under management for that, but she did an annual report last year, and they said they have invested 12.1 million, not including debt, into 5 acquisitions and incubations within the holding company. So I thought that was cool. And this has definitely become a trend that Cody and people like, what's his name? Who's the tiny guy? Andrew Wilkinson have inspired. Everybody seems to be building a holding company nowadays.
Oh, I talked to so many folks that are doing this. And yeah, I mean, it's cool. I don't know a lot about the economics of it, to be honest with you. But I mean, if you can, I think the benefit with somebody like Cody, with somebody like Andrew, perhaps, is like, well, specifically with Cody, she has the distribution too, right? And if she's leaning into the distribution by having that big list as well.
But basically what you just said, Ryan, was she's can and has used her audience to help grow the companies in her holding company, right? And I think that's exactly what she's doing well that Alex and Layla are not doing. Maybe they have a good reason not to do that. I don't know. But she definitely promotes the companies that she's invested in. Have you seen CapCut, or not CapCut, but Viral Cuts? Did you see that launch that they did?
I have seen. It's funny, I didn't know that she was involved in that, but I've seen it pop up, which means she's probably doing a good job with the promotion of it.
Yeah, so I think Sampar was involved in that too. That's one that's either in the holding company or in the VC company that she invested in. She used her audience to promote that. I don't know how well it's doing as a business, but she's definitely done a great job marketing Viral Cuts. Like it's kind of a commodity business, so I don't love the model, but that's one example of what she's promoted. Another one, so the final thing I have is she in June made her biggest investment ever and became a co-owner of Rezzi Brands. Are you familiar with them? Have you heard of them before?
No.
Rezzi Brands is the fastest growing trade services franchise business in the country. So basically they have different franchises that you can buy and run. And it says trade services. I would call these home services. So they have a painting brand that you can franchise. It's called Pinks. And they have a window cleaning brand. So kind of like McDonald's, instead of restaurants, you can franchise a painting business or a window cleaning business. And maybe there's a couple other ones that they have too. Rezzi Brands was actually founded in 2022. They only have 68 employees. They have only 2 investors that I could find. One of those investors is Cody. And they have projected to have close to $30 million in system-wide sales in 2023. So let's just imagine they have that. And the tricky thing is, like, what is system-wide sales? I'm assuming that is sales across all of their franchises. So that's not actually the revenue of Rezzi Brand. It's probably much less than that, but they're growing quickly, I think, for a company that's founded like 2 years ago.
Yeah, speaks to the growth of it. That's awesome. Yeah, there's I guess one more example of that holdco with kind of a media arm or distribution arm. And that's, I know Sahil Bloom with, I forget this guy's Hunter
Hammond?
Hunter Hammonds. Yeah.
Yeah. What's their company called again?
So it's, I'm trying to remember what the actual name of the holdco is, but they've got all these agencies. They've got a ton of agencies that they've grown. I think I was following Hunter on Twitter. I still am, but like I was following him when he was doing.
Yeah, they did Viral Cuts. They did Viral Cuts. They have one called the Hey Friends. They have some ones that are probably better known and more successful than those.
Landed, Off Menu.
Landed, which is an offshoring hiring company, Off Menu design agency. I think it's interesting what they're doing. So they're doing like the portfolio model. They have all these different agencies. I'm sure they have shared services across the agencies. I don't know if they've raised capital for it. I did see a testimonial from Hunter on Cody's VC firm's website. So I'm assuming they raised money from Contrarian Thinking Capital, but I don't know. They might be using their own capital.
Yeah, so they're all connected in some way.
Somewhat. I mean, Cody partnered with them on the viral cuts thing. Maybe she was just involved in that deal, not like all the agencies. But and so he's partnering with Sahil Bloom, and they're like using Sahil's audience to grow these agencies, which is interesting. I don't know how successful they've been. They've had some big launches. I don't know as far as like revenue, what they're doing. I'm a little bit concerned about like the churn with some of those businesses, because some of the like the video editing, for example, like I just don't love that as agency service.
Yeah, it's I mean, agencies are a tough business, as we both know, but it's, I think having a media, having built-in distribution or distribution from a partner is so huge, which is why newsletters work so well. If a main source of revenue is service businesses or high ticket services,
they do work. Yeah. And I've kind of proven that model myself at a smaller level, building like a 7-figure agency off the back of a small newsletter of 20,000 subscribers and a small social media following. However, I don't love them as an example for negative CAC, because at least in my idea of negative CAC, you're using a shittier business model like media or info products to build a better business model like SaaS software or a fund, right? Or some type of technology thing. In this case, like they're using Sahil's media company to build an even shittier business model, which is services. And like, it's just so damn hard to scale a service business. And so I would almost love to just have like Sahil have like a SaaS company or an app. I think they would do better with that than having 6 different agencies. It sounds like running that is just like lighting your hair on fire every single day. But it may totally crush it. Like agencies definitely work. It's just different than other models.
Yeah. 6 agencies sounds intense. I won't lie.
Yeah, I'm good with one. Maybe not that. And I honestly, I think like running the media business is a lot, I wouldn't say easier, but a lot simpler than running a agency business. It's totally. Actually a lot harder, but definitely simpler and maybe more fun in many ways.
100%. Well, should we wrap it up there? I know we covered a lot.
I know it's a lot to cover. That was like 2 weeks in the making of like pulling that data together. It didn't take very long. It just took us 2 weeks to actually record it.
We finally covered negative CAC.
Yeah. Well, and if people have, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, and we'll have more examples, I'm sure, that will come up. I mean, I think the model that you described of media into products or into SaaS, that's not going away. If anything, it's just accelerating. So we'll be constantly hearkening back to this concept, I think, in the future.
Yeah. Let us know if you have examples that we missed or details that we didn't know about from these examples. That would be fun to see. Twitter or LinkedIn, find us. And that's it. The call to action is subscribe to the podcast, rate the podcast, subscribe on YouTube. You can search Newsletter Operator or Matt McGarry on YouTube and you'll find it. We're going to do that meetup for podcast listeners soon. So I think next episode we'll talk about that, and we're just going to set a date for that. And so if you leave a 5-star review on wherever you want to review it, and you subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you email that to me, matt@newsletteroperator.com, you will get invited to that podcast listener meetup where you can hang out with us live and we can answer questions or chat. That'd be fun. Thank you for listening. I hope you're enjoying this podcast. And if you are, we are hosting a live virtual event for podcast listeners. Me and Ryan Carr are going to do a Q&A, fireside chat, and hang out with our listeners who love the podcast. To get access to that, you just need to do 3 simple things that will help us grow the podcast faster and reach more people. Number 1 is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Number 2 is to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can find that by searching Matt McGarry on YouTube. That's where we publish the podcast video. And then number 3 is to send a screenshot of both of those things to me so I can send you an invite. Send that to my email, which is matt@newsletteroperator.com. That's also linked in the podcast description below. And that is it. That's all you need to do to get an invite. We will be doing this live call or potentially multiple live calls of our listeners after we reach 100 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast or Spotify and 1,000 YouTube subscribers. So the sooner you do that, the sooner you'll get the invite, and the sooner we'll be able to do this call with you, and it will be a lot of fun. So I hope to see you there.